The search for a new defensive coordinator for the Clemson Tigers is now officially underway, as Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers announced they have now officially parted ways with Wes Goodwin as defensive coordinator. So he is out, and I thought that some of the things that Swinney said were interesting. I'm going to read just maybe one sentence or two. After he thanked Wes Goodwin and said he was, gone, and they've decided to move on, he said, "I will start the interview process immediately and will hope to have our new defensive coordinator named by the end of the month or sooner." And so that catches me that hits me as interesting as, I don't know that necessarily means that they haven't interviewed anyone yet, but perhaps they haven't even started the interviews. But the fact that he would say it could last to the end of the month, I was planning on just waiting to do another video until it was official who they would choose. But that may be like 3 weeks out. So I figured let's hop back on, discuss it a bit more. I did a full breakdown of last year's Clemson defense and their PFF grades and really what that means for 2025. So I want to talk about that and don't want to wait any longer. But before I dive into the PFF grades, I want to quickly kind of rehash a little bit of a previous video where I talked about Clemson defensive coordinator options. And the name that we've heard thrown out there, maybe as a leading candidate, I don't know how solid that intel is, but was thrown out by the Post and Courier, was Tim Banks at Tennessee. And it's interesting, we still haven't heard anything about him officially re-signing an extension with Tennessee, or a new contract, I guess would be with Tennessee, or going to Miami, which is the other place where he's been linked. So I would think he's very much still on the table. And I do love and kind of think this is very possible because he's stylistically what Dabo loves so much about Brent Venables is it's an attacking defense. And that stat there at the bottom from 2021 to 2023, the Vols led the SEC in tackles for loss per game, and they were third in turnovers gained. And they only allowed 2022 and 2023 3.24 rushes yards per rush, which led the SEC across those 2 years. I don't know how those all sort out if you had 2024, but Tennessee was excellent defensively in 2024, although that was a little bit schedule aided. So I do think he'd be a strong hire and certainly a fit philosophically for what Clemson likes to do, what they thrived in when they had an attacking defense and an up-tempo offense. You kind of do want to pair those two. You don't want to go up-tempo offense and then bend but don't break defense because you'll wear out your defense. So I do think he's a strong option, even though he's not necessarily my number one option. But I think, I'd be really happy if they ended up with him. Tyler Santucci's perhaps a little riskier. He's only 36. And he's coached under Elko most of the time. So they had phenomenal defenses with him at Texas A&M and with Duke. His 2023 Duke defense led the ACC in points per game. Of course, they beat Clemson that year. His 2022 A&M defense was the number one in pass defense. It was top 25 in scoring defense nationally. So really good, but also under Elko. His 1 year at Georgia Tech, they were good, but they weren't great. I mean, they still allowed 30 points 7 different times. So it wasn't a great Georgia Tech defense. It was a much improved one, though. They were 128th in rush defense the year prior. He fixed it, got up to 32nd. So he's certainly shown some competence. And if he's learned all that it seems like he has from Elko, it seems like he could be really elite. He's young. It seems very attainable. Georgia Tech's doing big things in terms of spending money to acquire talent, but I don't know if they have the same war chest for assistant coaches as Clemson does, and it's easier to win at Clemson. Clemson took their AD. I think it's totally realistic that Clemson could take their DC. So we'll see if they do it. I think that'd be an exciting hire, but it's definitely riskier than Tim Banks at Tennessee. Definitely riskier. There's less track record there. Another guy, maybe a little more risk, same age, 36 years old, but the defensive coordinator for Illinois is he's been their DC for 2 years. What I like about both Santucci at Georgia Tech and going to his time at Duke and Aaron Henry is they've had less talent than their competition and schemed around that. So not saying they don't have any talent. They're still, Power 5 programs, but Georgia Tech doesn't have elite talent. Illinois doesn't have elite talent. Aaron Henry making do with that. They just shut down Lenore Sellers' running game and beat South Carolina bowl game. That's nice. He was the DB coach who coached up an unrated Devin Witherspoon into being probably like the best cornerback in the country, Big Ten DB of the year and number 5 pick in the draft. I think, again, a little bit less track record than a Tim Banks, but I love the upside. Would be really exciting to add him. Probably my number one option is Jim Leonard. I talked about this in a previous video, but I think to me, this is a slam dunk. I mean, he's got the NFL experience being with a very good Broncos team right now. Broncos team that is 8th in yards per pass allowed. They're 8th. They're 7th in interceptions. So he's got the NFL resume there. Well, I mean, he's only a pass game coordinator now, but he also played for 10 years in the NFL. So he's got a pretty good NFL resume. His teams at Wisconsin, those defenses were awesome. He was a Broyles Award finalist for that work. In 2020, they were 9th in scoring defense. In 2021, 4th. In 2022, 17th. So I feel like he's a really safe pick. He's only 42. So it's kind of a balance between the Tim Banks and some of the other guys like an Aaron Henry, where Wisconsin maybe didn't have quite the talent that a Tennessee does, but they had more than like a Georgia Tech or an Illinois. He's kind of at the in-between. He's not 36, but he's also not in his 50s. I think this is the home run hire. Another name that was thrown out is Tom Allen. Again, another really strong hire. Don't love it as much as the others. What he did at Indiana was as a head coach, and it was good, but really their best year was the COVID year, which I take with a grain of salt. And he's done phenomenal at Penn State. Penn State has had an incredible year, but he took over a really good defense there. So don't love that one quite as much. But again, any of these guys that I've mentioned so far would be home run hires. A guy I didn't talk about in the previous video, which I'll link to at the end of this, so make sure you do check that out. But a guy I didn't talk about was Steve Wilks. I saw Rock Boys talking about him as a potential candidate. I don't know. Maybe it is. He's at Charlotte. He's at the 49ers, the Charlotte 49ers right now. He's previously at one point with the Charlotte Panthers. So he's got some connections to that area. I think maybe his more notable role was the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. They won they went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. But when I look at this resume, I mean, it's good for sure, but I don't know if it's quite as standout as some of the others that we've talked through. That 49ers defense was really good. They also let him go at the end of the year, so there was something there that they didn't love. The Panthers defense that he coached was not so good. The Missouri defense that he coached was not good at all. So, I mean, certainly plenty of experience, but I don't know that any of it is necessarily kind of knock your socks off. This is outstanding. Kind of what I see with Jim Leonard, or even what some of the other guys did in individual seasons. So don't love that one as much. And then Lorenzo Ward is another guy. It would technically be an internal hire, but not really. He's a special assistant at Clemson right now, but he's got a lot of external experience. He coached those really good South Carolina teams from 2009 to 2015, the teams that actually beat Clemson with some regularity. Those are good defenses. In 2010, they were 24th in scoring defense. They had a great run from 11, 12, 13, where they were 11th, 13th, and 12th. And then they regressed after that, kind of at the end of the Spurrier run. So some good experience there. He was a DC at Fresno State. He was the interim head coach under Bobby Petrino when that whole thing kind of blew up. He ended up taking over afterwards. He wasn't their DC. He was just a DB coach then. And he was a long time, or not long time, but most recently he was the DC at Chattanooga. They had some decent defenses. Some of them were pretty solid. The 2021 Chattanooga defense only allowed 17.1 points per game. So I think he'd be good, but I'd rather see, like, if Clemson were to hire someone like, say, Jim Leonard, who's also a safeties coach, maybe you just let Jim Leonard be the DC and you don't necessarily assign him safeties, and use the unlimited coaching rule to let Lorenzo Ward be a linebacker coach, but not count towards that limit of off-campus recruiting coaches. So maybe Jim Leonard doesn't have a position assigned to him, and Lorenzo Ward doesn't have off-campus recruiting assigned to him. So you can get an extra coach, you just can't get the extra off-campus recruiter. I think that's kind of where you plug in with a Lorenzo Ward, not necessarily as a DC, but I do actually have a high opinion of him based on his resume. Obviously, have not met him. So that's sort of the update, but we may not find out for 3 weeks. So just wanted to kind of refresh that list and note that it is now official that Wes Goodwin is not going to be with Clemson next year. Doesn't sound like in any capacity, although it seemed possible he'd come back as an analyst, but it seems like that's pretty unlikely now. So we'll see. I think this is a pretty strong list if Clemson hires off it, particularly the top, I think it was 5. Let's take a look at these PFF grades. So this is the 2024 season, and we'll start with the defensive line. where you see no Peter Woods because he is listed as a defensive end for our purposes. He took, he moved there, then he got hurt. He ended the season as a defensive tackle, but the snaps, the majority were still at end. So we'll talk about him there. But you look at Peyton Page and Stephylan Green, and you got to be impressed. Page kind of having a going out on a strong note. I don't know how big of a NFL prospect or draft prospect he is, but really good way to end his career. I thought he was an above average player for Clemson, really valuable. Had 32 tackles. He had that pick 6 against the Citadel, which was pretty cool. He was really reliable, played 580 snaps. So really Clemson's best defensive tackle on the season. So kudos to him. Stephylan Green is another guy who had a strong season, and his was a prove it year because he was a redshirt freshman, and he proved that he was ready. He played 309 snaps. He was the second best defensive tackle they had. And that duo was pretty solid. And then once you added Peter Woods to it, you had a trio there that was really good. Capehart was limited by injury. He played 246 snaps, so actually less than Green. And I don't know if he was always 100%. I mean, he's above average, as you can see from the chart there. Obviously, the far right would be the highest rated or graded defensive tackle in the ACC, and the far left boundary is the lowest rated defensive tackle in the ACC. So he's certainly in the green. Capehart was good. Hopefully he comes back because there you got three good players there. Peyton Page is leaving, so that leaves you 2 with Peter Woods moving back. That's a great trio. Now Trey Williams is gone. He's transferred. He's off to play his 6th season at Michigan. And it's a little weird. These 2020 seasons where a guy redshirted in 2020, but it was the COVID year. So you get the redshirt extra year and you get the COVID waiver year. So just by being on campus for 2020, you get a bonus year. And if you redshirted, you essentially get 2 extra years, whereas Peyton Page does not. A little goofy how they do that. I hope that they've talked about just giving everyone 5 years. I think they should just give everyone 5 years, have no red shirts, have no waivers, have no medical waivers, nothing, just 5 years. That's it. Would make this a lot easier. I would welcome that. But Trey Williams leaves. He was okay. I mean, he was average. He obviously had the really bad block in the back penalty against Texas that swung the game a bit, cost him 4 points and chunks of minutes. But he was good. He finally stayed healthy and he was serviceable. But I think the loss there is okay. I think it's something they can certainly overcome. If you have Capehart coming back, which I guess isn't 100% at this point, if you got him back, you got Green, you feel good that when you drop Peter Woods, probably your best defensive player next year, you drop him into that, I think you've got at least a good little trio there. Let's look at defensive end. So here's where you see Peter Woods there, but not the best. TJ Parker was outstanding. Really, really valuable. He started off okay, and it turned out he had some sort of migraine or headache issue. But once that was behind him, he was excellent. Peter Woods, he was better as a freshman when he was playing at his correct position. And this is where I thought the coaching staff, and I said this at the time, they should have taken a DE transfer. And this way they could leave Woods at his natural position because he would have been even better. But he's so good that even splitting time and being hurt, I mean, he's excellent. So next year you're going to have Woods and Parker at end and tackle. They're going to be an elite trio. And then he wasn't on the team last year, but I put Will Held on this chart just so you could see how big the difference is and how big of an upgrade he's going to be from some of the guys that got hundreds of snaps. So like Denhoff had 385 snaps, and you see how huge of a gulf there is between Helt and Denhoff. So I think that's a massive upgrade there. You're going to have Parker, Helt on the outside with Woods and Green and Capehart on the inside. I mean, I think that's a tremendous upgrade. This is exactly where you use the portal, where you have a hole, you fill it. And I don't know if filling that hole is why Hoffler left, but I think based on this chart, I don't think you're overly worried about Hoffler leaving and going to Georgia Tech. I was actually surprised that he was above Denhoff in PFF grades because from an eye test, I thought he'd be below him. Hoffler graded slightly higher, but he was really weak against the run per PFF. He had 256 snaps. Jaheim Lawson, he had 371 snaps, and he's a pretty decent pass rusher. He is somewhat weak against the run, but to use him in a more pass rush kind of role, like a third down package, I like Lawson. I think he can contribute. And if he's your first guy off the bench, I think that's fine. If him and Denhoff are your primary reserves, I think that's okay. You just don't want to be starting them. I think Lawson has a chance to get better, and I think he's already only marginally below average just because he's not very good against the run. But I think this is a spot where there could be some depth concerns. They're going to need, you've got Parker, you've got Helt, so you feel good about the starters, and then you have Lawson and Denhoff, so you feel fine about their backups. But then beyond that, once you get outside the two deep, you really need someone to be playable. So Darian Mayo redshirted this year as a true freshman. Will he be ready to contribute if they need him? Not necessarily in a huge role, but can he play some snaps if a guy goes down? Same with Ari Watford, a true freshman, or Zaire Patterson, who's now going to be a redshirt senior who's basically never played. Can he contribute? Or a guy I like, Armand Mason, he's going to be a redshirt senior. Can he contribute? If you don't trust any of them in a bind where someone's hurt, then you may need help from the portal. But if even just one of those guys steps up, then you've got like 5 guys essentially, and you're pretty good at defensive end. That's really the difference that bringing in one transfer makes. It could fix a whole room, and that's what it does at defensive end. So really happy about that. Linebacker is a weird spot, and really the surprising thing is Sammy Brown coming up as average-ish and third there. By the end of the year, he was really good, and my eye test would have had him better. But at the beginning of the year, I thought he was struggling, and that's sort of what the PFF grades say, is he didn't know all the run fits necessarily. But by the end of the year, he was figuring it out. The game was slowing down. He has said as much, and his speed and strength combo is just so elite. So I think next year you see him make a big leap now that he's put it together. The most interesting guy on the list, though, is Barrett Carter. As a sophomore, true sophomore, he had an 81.4 PFF grade, which would have put him way into the green, a good bit past where Wade Woodaz is now. Wade Woodaz is around a 73. So Carter would have been way, way into the green. But he's declined every year since then. So 81.4 as a sophomore, and then went down again to a 68.5, which is just average, which is why you see him in the middle there. And I think that is kind of commentary, for being honest, on the coaching at linebacker from Wes Goodwin. And to me, that's maybe the biggest reason to look for someone else in that role. I think Barrett Carter's the prime example. Was expecting a huge breakout year for Carter this year after was kind of a sophomore slump his junior year. I know that sounds weird, but his second year as a starter, he kind of took a step back. I thought this was a big bounce back year. It wasn't, or didn't turn out that way. So he was actually Clemson's second best linebacker. And then the best linebacker Clemson had by a decent amount was Wade Woodaz, who's been steady at right around 73 every year at Clemson. So with a new linebacker coach, can he finally take a jump and be elite? I think maybe. I think with Woodaz taking a jump and Sammy Brown taking a jump next year, would not surprise me if you had an elite duo finally, because I feel like we've been talking about Clemson linebackers being elite for a while, and they've been fine, but they really haven't delivered on just the lofty expectations. So maybe next year's is the year, excuse me. But there is a little bit of a depth concern. I only show major contributors here on these charts, but behind Sammy Brown and Wade Woodaz, you've got 2 Atlanta natives, Jamal Anderson and D. Creighton. You really need them to come through for you. If not, you're relying pretty heavily on Kobe McLeod to be healthy, come back and be healthy and be good. I just don't know how. You're going to need one or two of probably 2 of those 3 to really work out. I don't know if you want to bet on that. Clemson's already looking in the transfer portal. They've already invited Alabama transfer Jeremiah Alexander onto campus. He's going to be there on Tuesday, January the 7th, unless something changes. So Coach Sweeney and staff doing a good job of filling holes, something we've essentially begged them to do for the last 3-4 years. Now they're doing it. And whenever Sweeney finally does, he could be a little bit of a laggard, but when he does it, it's going to be really well done. And that's what we're seeing now with some great additions with Tristan Smith at wide receiver and Will Helt at defensive end and maybe a linebacker now. That's elite, going out, getting the talent you need for just the right spots. So a little bit of a depth concern if they don't land one, but I think they will. And then I think you got 2 really good starters coming back. Cornerback, you got Mike Reed. You got, I think, the best position coach, best cornerback coach maybe in the country. I mean, Clemson is not wide receiver you, it's cornerback you. They churn out first-round talents, one of those being A.J. Terrell. And now I think in a year you might have another one in his brother, Avion Terrell. He was a star this year. He was excellent. You see him way into the green there. Ashton Hampton, as a true freshman, really showed out. And then Jaden Lucas, I heard a lot. There's always a lot of chatter about people complaining about him, but 532 snaps, really quality. I think you got 3 guys who are really, really good. And then Shelton Lewis, who was awesome in 2023, had some struggles that I didn't expect. He played some nickel. His PFF grade went down over 16 points. It went from about a 70 to about a 54. So pretty big drop for him. And I don't know that he was totally healthy. So maybe you see a big bounce back year from him. He only had, I think it was 198 snaps. So he actually technically doesn't qualify for a PFF grade, but I put him on there anyway because I think it's helpful to understand, to not forget about him. Note that he had a tough year. He's got a lot of bounce back opportunity. If he does, you got 4 really good cornerbacks / nickels if they choose to use them that way. So I think this is a position of strength, or was a position of strength. I think it'll be even more of a position of strength in 2025. Mike Reed does an awesome job. And let me get safety up here. Okay, here's safety. So safety, this is my last chance to just brag on RJ Mickens, who I've for years said is Clemson's most underrated player. He actually was Clemson's best player on defense per PFF grades. Now, fairness, it was basically a tie with TJ Parker, but by 0.1, he had him beat when I last checked PFF grades. So I'm going to give it to him. And it's true, Peter Woods was playing out of position for a chunk of the year. TJ Parker's battling headaches, but I don't care. Mickens was awesome. Whether you call him the best player on the defense or the top 3 player on defense, he was excellent. By far, Clemson's best safety. Clemson's really going to miss him, and I think may miss him more than maybe anyone else on that defense. That's going to be a tough one to replace. Beyond him, you're looking at Kylon Griffin and Khalil Barnes. They were excellent in 2023. They had really good freshman and redshirt freshman seasons. They had some true sophomore slumps. They took a big step back. I don't know if there's any other way to say it. Now, does that even out? I think so. I think you see those 2 guys be decent starters, but are either of them going to jump all the way that far into the green as RJ Mickens? I don't know about that. So you got those 2, and then you're looking at Ricardo Jones, who only played 151 snaps, nowhere near enough to bother putting on here, although I did put Venables on here with only 161. You can see he was below average there. But Ricardo Jones, he only played 151. I think you see him, he's either going to have a good spring and he's going to be in position to play a major role, or Clemson is going to need something from the portal at safety. Maybe they can add a linebacker so Khalil Barnes could be full-time safety and not take any snaps at nickel. That would help alleviate, it's a trickle-down effect. You add a linebacker, you let Khalil Barnes be a full-time safety. That helps your safety depth. You got other guys like Robert Billings who didn't play much. But I think Ricardo Jones is going to be key for their depth. Otherwise, they'll go into the portal. Maybe they need to go in the portal anyway. So that's sort of how things shook out at on defense with the PFF grades. A few things were surprising. RJ Mickens being that good was kind of a cool affirmation to see. I expected him to be high, but not literally Clemson's highest graded defensive player. Some of the guys were losing, seeing them graded low is maybe a little bit of relief. Seeing Will Helt graded so high is exciting. Tristan Smith was also graded really high, although not shown there. He is obviously on offense as a wide receiver. But I think a lot of that yields optimism. They just need to get a really great coordinator to get all these good, talented players in the right spot at the right time. Before we wrap this up, just to hit on Clemson basketball, they knocked off Cal and they knocked off Stanford to reach 4-0 in conference play. And, it's true the ACC is way down, but I don't think of that as anything that negates what Clemson's doing. I think of it as, hey, Clemson's got a special opportunity here to not only get a double bye, but maybe finish higher than they have in a really long time. Really have a actually kind of realistic shot to win a conference, something that they haven't done. They've never won the ACC tournament. They've only done it once in the regular season in basketball. So I think this is a year of almost heightened importance because the ACC is down. A lot of the teams they'll play are ugly losses if you lose to them. Boston College, Virginia Tech in particular, and they play Virginia Tech twice. Those games you cannot lose. But up next, they'll have Louisville, which is actually going to be really tough. Louisville, much improved under new coach Pat Kelsey. They are 10-5, 3-1. They actually have, according to Ken Palm, a 57% chance to beat Clemson. It is in Louisville. So that's going to be a tough one and may go a long way in determining, how the ACC standings shake out. Louisville's got Chucky Hepburn, a Wisconsin transfer guard, 6'2", 190, a senior who can knock down threes, but doesn't necessarily only shoot threes. He's pretty even actually between twos and threes on attempts taken. So they'll have to shut him down or at least slow him down. But Clemson's perimeter defense is pretty elite. That's really their strength. So I think the matchup's okay for them. But that's going to be a great game Tuesday night, 7:00. But Clemson so far, their resume is shaking out so far to be kind of a 7, 8, 9 kind of seed. But still chance to improve that. Plenty of chance to improve that. Really starting with Louisville, another chance is a top 50 win. They've got some really good wins. They beat Kentucky, who turned around right after losing to Clemson and they beat Gonzaga in Seattle. So that's an incredible win for Kentucky. Kentucky is a top 20 team, according to KenPom. Clemson also beat Penn State, who's in the top 40. They beat San Francisco, who's 61 in KenPom. And they just beat Wake Forest, who's 84. Wake Forest actually seems to be riding the ship, but that was a good win by Clemson. So Clemson will go on the road to Louisville, and then they host a Florida State team that, they're okay. I don't know how good they are. They just lost to Louisville. They beat Syracuse, but they don't really have any great wins per se. Florida State, that is. I think that's a very, very winnable home game for Clemson. Hopefully it doesn't snow and impact the fan turnout, but I think Clemson basketball is looking really strong. Got to feel really optimistic. Their win against Cal was interesting because Peja Stojakovic's son, Andre Stojakovic, was unbelievable. It was like, I didn't really believe Clemson would lose, so I wasn't like upset about it. And it was just like a pleasure to watch this guy. He's just like a superstar in the making. Just incredible plays in the post. He's 6'7", but also outstanding outside shooting, driving. I mean, he was a star. It was fun to watch. But the other thing that was fun to watch is Christian Reeves got the start at center. I thought he played well. Was honestly bummed he didn't play at all in the second half. But Victor Larkin, who had a black eye and either the flu or some sort of cold, sat the first half, played a lot of the second half, didn't score, but his defense changed the game, really shut down Stojakovic's driving, ability to score in the post, but really everyone from Cal, their ability to score in the post, changed that game. So it was cool to see his impact defensively. I think this is a really good Clemson basketball team. So don't miss them on Tuesday and then again on Saturday. As always, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. It really helps out and I appreciate it.